Thank you, everyone. So this is a particularly exciting panel for me to be a part of. We have not just some of the most representative people as it pertains to the types of clients we work with, we also are going to be talking about how all the data connects, how we're using it, and how new technology, like AI, although I'm trying to avoid the term AI because it seems to be what we always talk about, is going to change everything. And the thing is, right now we're in a renaissance with how we are able to leverage that data to go beyond what we've been doing for the last 5 years. But everyone on this panel was part of the initial renaissance where we pulled together health data and media data to quantify the exact impact that the campaigns have had. And that was 5 years ago or longer. And 5 years ago, this group predicted that, built it, and now they're going to tell us how they're using the tech that we have today, as well as the leading tech that's evolving in the future. So it's a really exciting time. So the panel, Bill Veltri, he comes to us from Deerfield, but he's worked at a few other boutique or few other medium-sized brands as well as at PHM, doing analytics like this. Kate Gattuso-Duffy, who is at Pfizer, representing among the largest pharma companies out there, as well as having experience with a lot of different agencies in our agency life. Mike Caruso from SSCG, which really crosses across all of them, and Mike Bregman from Havas, where you manage one of the largest analytics teams really in the industry. So we have a really diverse and great view of not just what we are able to do and what the future has, but also how we got here. So super excited. So first, things are changing, right? Our ability to do what we do today compared to 5 years ago is pretty dramatic, and we talk about the level of insights, but it's that velocity that Chris was talking to earlier that already is changing. So things get faster and faster, and they will get more quick as we progress. But how has things changed from just 5 years ago as it pertains to what we're doing and how we're managing campaigns? Mike Caruso.
Yeah, I think just the speed alone has increased rapidly, right? Obviously, I'll be the first one to say the AI word today, but just with AI-powered tools, AI being the backbone of a lot of ad servers and things of that nature, I think it's increased our speed to performance, right? And I think when you're talking about any kind of real-time optimization, anything where you're able to pull different levers, that's a key aspect, especially, I lead the biddable practice at SSCG. It's really all we care about. And when you think about just the industry as a whole, you see more and more publishers have more biddable capabilities, right? Previous publishers that were direct-only committed buys are now becoming more biddable in the space, and that's because the technology has improved so much and allowed them to have that new capability. So overall, I think speed to performance, and I think in the industry's ability to make new capabilities that adapt to that is very important, and that's what I've seen change over the last 5 years.
Yeah, and I think, you said it as well. 5 years ago, we were talking to stakeholders, to people to say, hey, how do we shift from vanity metrics like click-through rate and impressions to really optimizing on outcomes? And we had to really make that case and that what and that why. And I think the same kind of thing is going to start to happen in the next year or so when we're talking about the term real-term optimization, right? For healthcare, that wasn't necessarily a term that allowed us to be strategic with the optimization and the data sources that we would be able to optimize in real time. So now it's really that shift of looking forward. How do we make sure we move quickly in healthcare with the right data sets at the right speed and latency to improve that personalization?
We've worked on a lot of campaigns together, so when I think about speed, I think about those 5 years ago and the speed to education, which is my favorite topic. Ultimately, being able to make sure that clients are up to speed on the data sets that are available to them to provide the ability to mine and find those nuggets that are going to create impact. Being an advocate from the agency side now, no longer on the client side, it's an interesting position to be able to see how marketers have changed the speed of change in marketing technology, the marketers that are manning many of the individual brands that we're servicing, the ability that they have to mine that data, the curiosity that's available today is so different than 5 years ago. And I think it's all because of the focus or the latent need on, results.
Mike, what do you see at Havas?
Yeah, there's a lot of change within the agency, and I'll park agency change. We'll probably pick up on AI and our tools in a bit. But I think it's interesting to start from the client perspective. Our clients want growth now more than ever. I think they're under a lot of pressure to get things done quickly. So the idea of the brief itself, how you think about a campaign plan, how you receive those funds, what the right allocation, tool, process, mathematical equation is, that's being done really rapidly. And I think our clients want to see that done in a smarter way. So it's less about just always on experimentation. It's about the reinvention of the plan itself. And some of that has to be new creative elements, new orchestration, new design, new thinking. Where I think our clients are asking for us to help them is stress testing some of their own innovation initiatives. And that could be the personalization, it could be data orchestration, third-party data partners. It could be some of their attribution models and MMM models, but I think all of that begins with what is the purpose of the budget itself? How do you make it that much smarter, more agile, more data-driven?
So it's funny because we're all trying to avoid the AI term because it does seem to take over the conversation. And I don't know if you've noticed, AI, of course, is in the news, but it doesn't matter what we're talking about. It could be physical trainers training athletes, and we can improve their swim stroke, right? It can be doctors reading, like radiologists reading X-rays. When we talk about AI, AI is just the enabler. Rarely do we actually talk about the use itself. So I wanted to kind of direct this, Mike Bregman, to you. Specifically, what are the personas that you see within your teams using AI, and how is it different from persona to persona?
Yeah, so there's 4 primary personas that we think about for AI, and there's hundreds of use cases. Google just came out with a study that had 350 plus use cases. So we're not trying to unpack every use case. We're actually trying to think about the user. How do we help the user to be that much smarter with AI? And this idea of art and science is really important. There's really human and machine. The machine itself is that AI element that we're trying to build into the process to drive more efficiency. The human has to figure out what problem they're solving. And there's 4 main personas. So the first one is the planner themselves. Planning is a lot of art. And they have to figure out what's the barrier they're trying to solve, what's the consumer journey, who is the patient, who is the physician audience, et cetera. There's massive research that they have to go through. The AI helps them sift through a lot of those ideas and package it in a much more agile way. The second one is the Insights Pro. So when you think about insights overall, you're getting a lot of campaign data back. Sometimes you're looking at prior results. You're thinking about what is the right way to create the creative components. What's the right way to use different channels for different missions. So the Insights Pro also has to shift through data, but they have to use data in a smarter way to compound the activities that are market already. So it's the agility of getting the insights back. The third one's the buyer. And I think the DSPs are really critical to getting the buyer to be smarter. The AI needs to be conversational. And you need to be able to prompt specific messages. So is this publisher working? How do I think about the frequency capping? Is there a regionality element? Right? There's millions of questions that you can get. And figuring out those protocols, those prompts, of how to work with the AI, that's really a key playbook that we're developing. And then the fourth one is my favorite. It's the citizen data scientist. So I think there's a lot of elements of SQL and Python and R code. We can geek out a little bit in this panel, I'm assuming. There's folks that don't know the basics of how to write those. With AI, there's actually prompt management where you can actually the AI can write the code for you. You can put that into different clean rooms, and you can do smarter analytics on the back end. So the attribution, the closed loop, the things that used to take 3 months, you'd have to wait for some of these script-lift studies. Now it can be done much more rapidly.
So the thing that I see, though, all of that's an enabler. Foundationally, though, it's about having the data connected underneath. So in every one of those examples, it really was about that data itself. What data sets are we combining or need to combine to be able to deliver these insights, right? Because I think you're spot on. Like those are all the best uses. Now, how do we get them all to a place where we can enable more of it?
So I think I can maybe explain a little bit on the Omnicom side of things, kind of how we're thinking about it, and as it connects to the data as well. So those personas are obviously very realistic personas at an agency level of the different types of people who would need to access AI tools, data, et cetera, right? What we have is we have what we call Omni, right? That's our operating system and orchestration system. And it sits on a foundational layer of a ton of data from third parties. A client's first party data could come in as well as any proprietary data we may have. And obviously there's compliance guardrails and things for that foundational layer. But what we've done is we've also built specific applications and AI agents for every one of those kinds of personas, right? So not only do you have that layer kind of feeding all of them or access to all that data, you now have purpose-built applications or purpose-built AI agents that speak specifically to a data analyst or to a planner or to a biddable campaign manager, right? Where they can actually leverage that in each specific use case. The good thing also is because everyone has access, including our clients, it can keep a repository of whatever you build for others to see, right? I think data silos are a big thing, obviously, in our industry, but also organization silos are a problem as well. If someone's doing really good work in one area and another team in another department isn't able to see it, then you lose that cross-collaboration, right? So it kind of solves that as well, where you can use the specific AI agent, a specific application, but then someone else is able to also see what you did and maybe build on that for their, whatever their persona specializes in.
I think being on the client side, you really get a front row view into the fragmentation of data, right? And something that I maybe even a year ago didn't even realize is there's so many dashboards that we have to look at, which is a dashboard, right? Ideally, we stop talking about dashboards. We start talking about how our data connects, and we use AI to drive decisions. But until we get those dashboards to connect and the data to underlying connect, we're still going to have 6 or 7 data sources, which might be telling us different things. So how can we kind of bring that data infrastructure together while all of the different data models have their own structure, their own piece? That's why I really see a ton of opportunity in AI to help us say, okay, across Adobe Analytics to IQVIA data, to Crossix data, to spend data, to DSP data, everything that we have at our fingertips, market research, everything else that sits on the business side, can you write some sort of script to help us normalize all that, bring it together, and then really help us do our jobs quicker and faster?
I thought you were going to say the other bad word, omni-channel, but you didn't, so that was good.
Thank you.
But I think you're right. There's a lot of dashboards to look at, and it's ultimately left up to the advocates of your business, like an agency, to make sure that you understand all of the data sources that are available to you. I think what we want to do from a Deerfield approach or even from an agency approach holistically in the industry is be able to make sure that we understand each of the individual stakeholders' need for data, because when you're talking about an internal analytics team who's trying to do a mixed model, their data sets and what they're looking at are ultimately very different than what my media team is ultimately optimizing off of. There's connectivity between those two, but we want to make sure that we're bridging the gap so that mixed models and the analytics that are happening at the client are matching what's happening on the front end. So really making sure that we're connecting those two dots.
And Mike Bregman, you probably manage the largest organization amongst us. How do you manage to that organization and that level of accessibility across your teams?
We try to democratize as much of the data as we can. It's hard because you need really good training. You need really good systems access. The tools themselves have to be standardized in terms of taxonomy, lexicon, because to go into a massive data set, no matter the health data provider, you have to know what you're looking for. AI can help you to some extent, but you have to stress test what the AI is actually solving for. The prompt management is definitely a lot of training. But even when they go in, you have to make sure that the AI is using the data sources to answer the right questions and it's giving you a viable answer. There's a lot of sort of rocks that you get from AI that don't quite break the ceiling. What we try to train all of our analysts to do is to go in with a good hypothesis. There has to be a good learning agenda. The learning agenda has to be proven in some sort of scientific way, and it has to be mapped to effort versus value that it delivers. So if there's really high value, very low effort, that's a really good test to run. And then they just have to figure out the data partners to use, which could also be an RFP process. That could be some internal stakeholder interviews that they do to figure out what's worked and what hasn't for their clients. But then once the test is in market, how much time does it need, statistical significance, getting to, and look, it could be a really expensive test with a really high value vendor, and it could be $1 million effort on behalf of a client, in which case you need better org design, better stakeholder interviews, et cetera. So we train all of our analysts to go in with just a curiosity mindset, but to be mathematically driven all the way throughout the process. And if they're building their own sophisticated model, who is best to equip to help them to achieve success?
I think that works for large brands, larger agencies, but when you're working in small to mid-sized pharma, there's not a lot of time or money to actually do that test and learn. So you have to be very agile, and the learning agenda becomes more important where you're setting up based off of what you know. You may not have the budget to test and learn in a ton of different channels or to collect a lot of different data sets. So it's a lot about risk, right? Being able to take the risk that's needed in order to drive the business forward without having maybe all of the answers or all of the data sets to analyze. So I think it's definitely counterbalanced.
So when you look at the future, if you look at short term, the next year, year and a half, and then long term, 5 years, which which is a long time in the world of data connectivity and AI. What does 1 to 2 years look like with what we're doing today, which I think we all in this room can relate to? And then what are the things you think in 5 years that we're not even, we don't even have eyes on right now, that will be that future state that we'll be working in?
Sure. So when you're thinking 1 to 2, ideally, right, we spend the next year really being purposeful about how we want to use the technology and what business questions we want to answer with that technology, and then doing all of the back-end assessments to make sure that we have the right guardrails, the right trade-offs, and the right processes and decisions in place, right? So to me, the next year is probably build and test, and then build and scale a little bit. But when we talk about scale, we just have to be really careful because every audience, every patient, every provider is going to have different patient journey, provider journey, every different hurdle. So while we're scaling, just maintaining that audience first approach in how we're building these systems and technologies and connectivities. Year 2, I think we're off to the races. AI becomes a tool in our toolkit, right? Whether it's you get a 75-page analytics deck and you want to say, hey, recap this deck for me in 5 minutes and pull out the key insights, or hey, I have a data anomaly, I think my spend's wrong, can you figure out where you see things might pop up? And it becomes that element, or that that team that used to take a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to do a thing helps us do it really, really quickly. 5 years, we're kind of cutting the near out of real-time optimization for healthcare, right? I always kind of help caveat anytime somebody says real-time optimization, well, it's near real-time optimization really because there's a patient journey that you have to take into account, and you have to understand that time from exposure to conversion with your patients and that change in behavior with your providers. I think we'll increase our propensity in our real-time optimization model so that we really can kind of sit up on a stage like this and have everything working in the background to drive those incremental outcomes.
Yeah, I think what Kate's saying makes a lot of sense, and I think whenever we're working with different pharma clients in the space, they're obviously right now investing in AI, right? And we see that across the board. I think some obviously companies are more advanced right now than others, but everyone's kind of starting that, right? So in 2 years, I think a lot of companies are going to be more have a higher sense of depth in that technology. On the agency side, almost every tool we use over the past 2 years already has some level of AI weaved into it, right? And I think that is going to advance from an insights perspective even more, right? Look at Cortex announcement today, right? It was Copilot, a year and a half ago for Deep Intent, right? So I think that level of advancement in the tools we use is going to continue. 5 years from now, I think we're going to have a lot more data sources than we do now. I think not only in marketing, but I think just in health and wellness, digital health and wellness, there's going to be a lot more, whether it's wearables or telehealth or different types of devices being used that have new health data that might be marketable in the future, right? So one thing that is a priority for me and my team is really staying on top of what data sets can we leverage, Are they obviously compliant, but also are they new? Are they unique? Does it allow us to qualify our audience in newer ways? And I think that's going to continue to grow as the media landscape gets more diverse in the different tools people are using at a public consumer level.
I think there's going to be more and more orchestration that happens within the media landscape. I think right now we've gotten quite good at data orchestration, which is taking third-party partners, first party, maybe first party if you can get it in pharma, weaving that together, figuring out the right identity layers, putting that in a clean room element of some sort, and then targeting. I think we're good at that use case. Where I think we're going to get even better is content orchestration, and a lot of that is personalization theme driven, where you can think about what's the right message to deliver at the right time to that patient, where they are in their journey. And I think from there, it's thinking about the media journey themselves. They're on their patient journey, but what's the media journey that we want them to be on? How do you think about potential switching that has to happen between different medications, different brands? How do you think about intercepting them with new types of information as they're going through the journey? A lot of that, we don't quite have the real-time data points to figure out yet. The data's still monthly, sometimes weekly, but mostly monthly. And you have to wait for it to get refreshed with the right cadence in order to make some of those changes in the campaign design. So I think going from the identity layers and the data orchestration to the content, to the journey itself is the future over the next few years.
Autonomy, right? Automated learning models that are going to make decisions based on goals. I think that's where we're heading, in a place where I don't think it's going to be created equal for every single channel, but ultimately in the programmatic landscape, there's going to be a lot more trust put into the AI models that are ultimately going to generate better impact for us. And I think it's going to be obviously with a human touch and oversight, but that training is going to be so critically important for platforms like Deep Intent, as an example.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, just to piggyback on kind of what Mike was saying, I think personalized journeys are going to be obviously more available, more easy to hit, but I think, as we see more and more channels become able to be biddable or into DSPs. I mean, look at just the growth from a format and channel perspective that a DSP can do now than it could 5 years ago, right? EHR, gaming, point of care, digital out of home, right? These things are getting more advanced in DSPs, and with that comes the back-end data. So when you can see those clinical effectiveness metrics based off exposure for those channels, that helps fill in the journey that you need to hit, knowing that the journeys are not linear anymore, all right? And I think that data will really help propel us to getting more personalized.
I think when we say the terms personalized too, privacy comes along with that, right? So they're like right now when we think about it, there are new careers, new teams being formed to help govern and oversee AI privacy and application in healthcare. And I think it's going to be really interesting. It's a whole team of people learning a new technology that's evolving really quickly, while marketers are trying to also use it really quickly and start to refine the data it feeds and what it teaches it and how it learns. Seeing those two come together, I think is going to be really interesting.
Yeah, and privacy is something that obviously we manage to probably more than most industries. So what is the thing with privacy that concerns you the most? Not talking about the legislative side of things, because I don't think any of us want to predict what's going to happen there. But ultimately, as we do what we do, how do we deliver on our privacy promise, but still achieve the goals that we're trying to achieve?
I think guardrails are going to be really important. You touched on 5 years ago when we were sitting there talking about, why we need a shift from clicks to outcomes-based metric and script lift. Well, before that, the 6 to 8 years prior to that, we had done a ton of work making sure that we had the right infrastructure and had the right guardrails behind the scenes, the right data flow that protects patients' privacy. So I think, making sure that guardrail is first and foremost there, and being able to manage that conversation and having those trade-offs with conversations of how do we test, how do we do new cool things, how do we grow our data sets, but first testing with the data sets that we feel really confident are privacy compliant, and then moving into this world of ever-changing kind of building blocks capacity.
Yeah, and I think obviously rigorous due diligence in the partners you work with, keeping also internally leveraging even AI to monitor what's coming, what's evolving in the privacy space. But to Kate's point about things that we know are compliant, what can we leverage again, with AI now in the mix, right? Like contextual has always been in play, right? We know it's compliant, but there are now AI-powered contextual tools and partners you can work with that can get much more specific. I think another way we're trying to be compliant is in not only refining the targeting, but refining the inventory, right? We're trying to stay on top of. So if we know there's a patient audience and they're really interested in certain things, relevance to that audience is the most important thing. Chris was talking about it earlier in the keynote, right? Like relevancy should be what we strive for. So not only using like AI-powered contextual or using client's first-party data, which obviously is compliant and owned by the client, but also using the new technology to kind of reinforce and reinvigorate historical compliant data sets.
Yeah, of those 300 use cases I spoke of, every one of them has a legal packet behind it. And I've never dealt with so many lawyers as many as I deal with now, in a good way mostly, because they're trying to stress test to make sure that we don't get ourselves in trouble, that our clients don't get in trouble, that ultimately the partners that we work with, we're all, within this legal safety net that we obviously want to be in. There's a lot of gray areas, I think, right now within how to use AI and legal compliance. They're all trying to figure out, and I'm certainly not the expert on this at all. Probably need IA Tech Lab or someone like that to comment on it. But I think it's good discussion because we want to make sure we protect the privacy of every patient, physician. We want to make sure that when we target that we're doing it in a way that the best models and the best algorithms and the best AI prompts are reaching the intended target and eliminating waste in the system, but we're doing it in a way that is federally approved. So we're figuring it out, I think, right now in real time.
And that's the thing. While there certainly are AI privacy experts, the reality of it is, I think if any one of them went on a sabbatical, they probably would be outdated, and the environment is changing so quickly. It's also changing so quickly for all of us who are using AI. So the one thing I'll ask all of us is specifically, when you look at the marketer of the future, and really talking the next 5 years, I think our skill sets are going to have to dramatically change. So as we look at where we are, what would be the skill set you would look at to bring in a team that can be future-proof and grow with the next 5 years of evolution of data centralization, connectivity, and ultimately use of tools like AI and other things that we don't know about yet?
I would say agility and innovation, right, is our key areas, right? Because we will need to be able to move quickly. We will need to be able to say, okay, our process to create this report took 95 steps before. Now it needs to take 3, and we're able to send this out a week, 3 weeks, 4 weeks earlier, right? So I think really being able to move with uncertainty and have that agile ability while also keeping an eye towards how could this get better? What could I do differently? What new view can I look at with the data, and how can I bring value?
I think that it's probably a couple things. One is curiosity cannot change. I think we still need to train folks who are coming up in the industry to remain curious, ask really good questions, and don't trust just the data. Ask for more data, try to really uncover those individual nuggets that are gonna drive better impact for your clients. In addition to that, I think it's having a patient-centric mindset. I don't think that we can lose sight on who we do this all for. And AI is great, tech is nice, data is awesome, but at the end of all of that is a patient, and we have to make sure that we don't lose sight of that, and it's something that we continue to talk about and train. And then I think the third piece is remaining constant on the fact that we're creating impact, meaning that there's a forecast behind every single brand that we're responsible for contributing to. So making sure that folks understand how that forecast has been derived and how media plays into that forecast. It's so critically important.
I think, just to piggyback on Bill's point about the patient, I think that's an important piece that isn't really gonna change in the sense of, it should exist now if you're doing it well, right? There should be a certain level of passion about what the brand treats and how it helps patients, right? And that should be really what your strategy is based on. I think as technology, AI, whatever you want to call it, evolves, right? It gives time back to reinforce on that point, right? So if your data is automatically pulling or you're able to kind of get insights quicker, it should give you more time to learn truly about what your patients are looking for, what their challenges are, what the HCP's challenges are in prescribing, and really understand the brand. So what I would say is the technology advancements should give you time back to really think about your strategy and how it hits home for the brand. The second part, which I guess is more new, is with that technology, I think we need employees across the board, across every department, to really know how to dialogue with that technology, right? So prompting is obviously a very common thing talked about in the industry, but since most of these technologies are conversational in nature now, like having teams really trained on how to ask the right questions now that they've had the time to learn more about the brand and tell the system what you're trying to achieve, I think is going to be a key factor for success.
We're going through a couple retraining programs of our teams. So we're actually taking all of our analysts right now, and we have a pretty big group, and we're putting them through what we're calling the DAT, the Data Automation Team training. A lot of our analysts have come in and they don't know SQL, which is one of the foundational elements to data mining. They're stuck in Excel in some ways, and nothing against Microsoft. I think Excel is a fantastic product, but I think it's a limiting factor. It's a static table where you can't put in a billion rows. So you need to know net new skills, and AI can get you some of the way there, because you can ask within a prompt, what will I find if I look for X, Y, and Z parameters? But you need those skills as a way to become a more advanced user, a citizen data scientist, as I mentioned earlier. So we're going through this program, and one of the things we're trying to do is to make re-education exciting for our analysts, because they came in, some of them have been on the job for a year, they're part of this assembly line of building dashboards, and dashboards are great. We have thousands of them that we push out every week, but it's also a limiting factor. The dashboard can only get you so far. It's a static wireframe template where you feed usually similar types of data. And what we found is we're actually rebuilding dashboards for our clients almost quarterly. There's new asks, new data sources. Adobe's changing. What happens if I pull in CJA data or AJO? They love their three-letter acronyms at Adobe. So there's, we constantly have to rebuild the dashboard, and the analysts themselves are in this constant process of feeding in new information into this static template. So we're trying to think of a redesign to how information is democratized in the agency and for our clients. And if you think about social media platforms, they all have a scroll feature. You scroll through Pinterest, and you have lots of different pictures that are relevant for your interest and your contextual areas that you're searching for. Snapchat, Meta, they're all in the same game. We're trying to think about how do dashboards feed those same sort of insights. I know you guys have your trading module, and within that trader platform, there has to be a static screen. But what if there's a way to move the information around? We're thinking about mining the data through SQL and other advanced querying, but also the dashboard itself be more of a living object. So it's just some ways that we're thinking about re-envisioning how information is provided for our teams.
So there's so much going on in the future for us, and I know I'm excited. What is the thing that excites you? And this is our last question. So what's the thing that excites you about the future as it pertains to all the data connectivity and what we can accomplish to ultimately help patients be well? Start with you.
Platforms like Deep Intent. Was that a good answer? No, I'm kidding.
That is the best answer. All right.
Partnership, I mean, being able to create solutions and be a part of things that are going to drive the outcomes of tomorrow with platforms like Deep Intent, the product launches that are coming today. I think all of those things are what makes me love doing this, right? Helping more patients by technology, and this platform specifically, I'm very thankful for.
Yeah, I think Bill said it earlier around making sure we're focused on improving patients' lives and outcomes in the process. I think, there's nothing better than, from an analytics person, seeing a report and saying, okay, we increased our new patient starts by X amount, and that helped us do X more things with the dollars and grow that incrementality. So to me, that's really exciting, that speed to market, that speed to improvement and personalization and relevancy so that we can ultimately improve those outcomes.
Yeah, I think what I'm most excited about is more technological savvy kind of organizations across the board, both on the client side, on the agency side. I mean, we just spoke about education, so I might repeat myself a little bit, but I view AI and the latest in GAI as an idea accelerator, right? And I think with training, and one thing we've been trying to do is lay out our blueprint for AI, tell the different departments how AI is used across all these different things. But once that training is fully fleshed out and you have a large mass of people who now can accelerate their ideas for business outcomes, I think you're gonna see just really creative strategies. I think you're gonna see really informed measurement. I think it will only improve our client success once that holistic group of people, where it's not just like 5 AI experts at the company, where it's the entire company is really knows how to use it. That idea acceleration is what I'm most excited about.
I love the fluidity that's in the marketplace right now. I think we're getting much more agile. I think there's a lot more opportunities to shift dollars around. And by the way, I know we're trashing on television a little bit here. There's still a huge role for television in the media mix. And it is also becoming a lot more fluid. There's better options that you can take, I'm not preaching TV, by the way, but there is still that, upper funnel budget that you need that now you can start optimizing on a weekly basis. Obviously, it's switching to CTV and other types of video inventory. But I think there is a performance mindset, and data is having a golden age right now, which is great.